Right, next up we have, excuse me, next up we have an interesting game, and one that I wonder if my experience of this is slightly different, perhaps slightly unique, and quite unlike other people. And I guess I say that because the issues I ran into were quite significant, and it's not something I saw any mention or coverage of in the sort of extensive coverage that this game has had over the last few weeks. We're talking about Cult of the Lamb here, and this is again is a mixed title. I think to sort of kick things off, I think if I was to give this a rating out of 10, it would be a solid. I want to say 7. I'm tempted to give it a 6.5. If the issues that I had ran into were less or gone, I think it would be a 7. Nailed on. It's a good game. It's not great. For me, it ever so slightly outstayed its welcome, but that's just personal preference. And I think overall it's a very, very interesting and fun little game that isn't too onerous, isn't too long. I think maybe 10 to 15 hours. I know that's me extending things by about a third there, but it really depends on how quickly you can get through the bosses and how much you want to unlock on the way to doing that. So, what is Cult of the Lamb? Cult of the Lamb, essentially, is, for those, I'll start off with the cliche stuff and then I'll move on to be a bit more clear. If you've played a game like Hades, or what's that other game? Well, yeah, Hades is probably a good example. You'll have a rough idea of the main gameplay loop. You take on the role of a lamb who is sent to slaughter. As a sort of token of thanks to the gods. When you do that, you are slaughtered. You wake up in front of a different god who has been shackled and chained by these other apparent gods, and he says that he wants you to free him. So your job then is to start a cult. You then go off and start rounding up followers. You're sent back to what eventually will become your camp, and you round up followers. You indoctrinate them into your cult, and then you sort of build a community with them. So you build places like beds for them to stay in. You have to build a little chapel for you to preach and give out sermons for your cult. You have to you create a statue for people to worship you at your cult. You create mining so that people can go and mine stone. You create log chopper places so you can go in lumber yards. That's the word I'm looking for. So you can gather wood. You need to create farms for food. You have to create toilets. You have to make a kitchen, and then you can decorate it and stuff like that. And what you do is you use this area to develop your cult, make it larger, and then when you make it larger, obviously more people come to your cult and more people worship you, which then gives you more devotion, which you can use to unlock better items for your runs. So then once you've done that, you've fed, you think your cult is in a good enough place, you then go on a run, so to speak, into the dungeons, in which you enter the sort of dungeon areas in which you make a run at trying to kill the boss. So there are 4 main areas in this game, and there are sort of 4 sub-bosses to each area. So you fight each boss, you kill a boss, and then you'll see a little notch, 25% notch, fill up above on the little icon above the door that you enter. Then you do another one, you get half, and then so on to once you've completed the sort of notches on the little circle around your area, you'll then unlock a run that is much like every other run, but instead when you get to the end of that, you'll then fight the area boss, which is one of the 4 gods that is holding the chains for this god that you're trying to free. And then you fight him or them, and once you do that, that's the area completed, so to speak. And then you can then move on to the different area, but the thing is you can unlock all 4 areas fairly quickly. So if there's an area that you get stuck in, you can go and do other things. I think like to start the first area, you need to have like 1 follower. Then you have, it's like 5, 7, and 9 followers or something like that, something close to that. But so like as a sort of rule of thumb, you can unlock all 4 areas, say around about 10 followers, and you finish the game with about well over 20 followers, I found. So it is early on that you can unlock all these areas and then just sort of start working away. As you're going through the runs, you gather experience, you gather money, and But what you're doing is stuff that you've unlocked during your cult management. You can then, like, so say you unlock a weapon or you unlock a tier of weapons. These weapons can then be found. Same with, you have cards that will have buffs, so it'll be things like you get more health, you regenerate your mana when you go into a different room, you do more damage, and things like that, so that as you're doing the run, the idea being the more you develop the cult, the more better rounded, more good quality items that can then be found in your runs to then make you more powerful so that you can move through the game. As you're on the runs, obviously if you die without killing the boss, you are martyred and your cult sees you as weak because you weren't good enough to get to the boss and kill him. If you do the boss, you're then returned to your cult, during which time your statuses continue to decline if you're not managing it. So before you leave to go and do your dungeon run, you need to make sure that your cult's fully fed, because you can come back and your cult might be starving. Some of them might die. They don't like seeing dead followers, so your cult members also age and die as sort of they get older, and you've got to balance the risk versus return. So you can sacrifice your followers for boosts in devotion, but you can also murder your followers, and if these cult members see you murdering their followers, some of them will have negative effects. Some of them will have positive effects as well, but yeah, it's just sort of this risk reward. And again, as you progress, you unlock more things. So like, for example, the first bed you have to give your cult followers is a little bedroll. You can then upgrade that to a little TP thing, wigwam sort of thing, that's a bit more sturdy and doesn't collapse so often. And then you can again upgrade that to like a proper little building that they can use that won't collapse, and they can also generate devotion in that, so it increases the devotion you're allowed and also sort of reduces the sort of little micromanagement parts you need to do. There's also other things sort of around that area, so you can lead the cult, you have your cult area, and then there's a little community of areas that you can go to. So there's like a fishing port where you can fish for food, so you can come back and make better quality meals. There's a place you can go and play this game called Knucklebones, which is a fun little gambling game, and you can unlock things doing that. There's different areas, and each one will have a quest that will unlock stuff that you can make your character better, or sort of tailor a build in a certain direction more in line with your skills. And then there's also the things that you can unlock, like decorations and stuff, to make your area nicer and look more fun, other than the sort of little missions that pop up saying, oh, can you please put down 3 decorations and make the place look nicer. For the most part, the decoration stuff is all cosmetic, and that's, I guess, the sort of the run through of the general gameplay loop. It's really fun, it's really well done. I quite like the art style. It's not amazing, it's quite boring isn't the right word, but it's nice without being very remarkable. It's quite simple. Like I say, the gameplay loop is fun and generally rewarding. I think if the game had gone on any longer, it would begin to feel quite boring. But it sort of gets in and out in a nice enough time that I was ready for it to be finished, but I wasn't overly frustrated with the gameplay loop. The thing that really spoiled the experience for me, and again, I alluded to this at the start of this video, that I kept experiencing was a lot of bugs, and not just bugs that were slightly irritating. It would be bugs that would ruin runs. So one that I continue, it got to the point where so as you're going through the area, there's like fighting areas where you go through each room and you'll sort of come into contact with enemies that you need to kill to then move on. Once you finish that area, as you're on your sort of mission to the boss door, there's like a tree that you can sort of choose your direction. So things will come up like you can find new followers while you're doing a run. You can find places that have more resources when you do different runs. You can find places that will unlock different cards for you, that'll give you a card boost, that'll give you new weapons. Like I say, so there was one area where you can turn up and you can come into contact with a little sort of wave-based fighting thing that, once completed, if you manage to survive to the end, you'll be allowed to continue, and you'll also unlock a follower that will return to your cult, and then you can indoctrinate when you go back to do your little management and sort of tidying up and upkeep. The problem with this is I got to the point in the game where I couldn't progress. So if these sort of cult member areas would appear, I would have to ignore them and avoid them, because there was a certain biome, let's call it, set of levels that would have an enemy that looked like a centipede or a millipede that had a big head and a big long body, and once you killed it, it would sort of fall apart and then disappear. I would kill the enemy, its body would disappear, but its head would roll off into a corner and just get stuck, and the game would act as if I had an enemy on screen, which I didn't. And I'd be unable to progress, because you can't progress without completing an area. So I would have to restart the game. Eventually, I unlocked a thing that would let me return to my world, or sort of my camp, sorry. But again, it become really frustrating because I don't think I had a play session where I didn't have to restart the game, or I didn't encounter a bug that prevented me from progressing. So I would be mid-run that would be going really well. I would have a good weapon drop. I'd have strong weapons and have a good chance at beating one of the bosses. And then the game would have a bug and I'd be unable to progress. And it was so common that, like I say, there was not a single play period, sort of sitting, that I would play in a game that this didn't happen, and that I wouldn't be forced to restart the game in some way. And it's for a finished product, I can understand it. If making video games is hard, bugs happen. Bugs are in all games, but these were so prevalent that it just felt a bit unacceptable to me and frustrating, and really marred my experience, because I was then nervous going into certain areas, and if something wouldn't happen as quickly as I was expecting it, then I'd be like, oh no, is the game falling apart again? And when you're waiting for this to happen, it just becomes deeply frustrating. And then even beyond that, there's some other things you can do while you're in your camp, that you could perform rituals that will give you a boost. So you can do one that will boost your cult happiness for the day, so that it'll give you time to go off and do a dungeon run, or you can boost your fishing proficiency, so you can go off and catch more high quality fish for yourself. And then there's other things like you can marry followers, you can sacrifice followers. All of these things give you boosts. Several occasions that my character would just get stuck in the animation for doing a ritual, so I'd have to restart the game again and I'd lose progress. And none of it, I was going to say none of it is game breaking. It literally was game breaking. None of it was enough that I wanted to stop playing the game, but there was enough of it happening often enough that I would turn the game off and walk away, because I just lost too much progress. And again, it marred the experience, but I seem to be the only person that was experiencing these bugs. I've asked friends that I know that were playing the game, they didn't have it. I've watched lots of people streaming it on Twitch, no one seems to have these bugs. Except me. I mean, the other one is when I finally completed the game, I was like, oh, I've been enjoying it, maybe I can go back and continue to unlock stuff, and maybe look at the achievements that I've still got left to do, and maybe have a go at those. And then I looked at the game, was running through the decorations that I still had to unlock, and I just started getting like big white squares that wouldn't allow me to interact, and I couldn't see what a decoration was, I couldn't see if it was unlocked, and I couldn't even interact with these white squares. And I was like, no, this game is going to fall apart. And then steadily as the game went on and I got deeper into the game, and obviously it had more to do, I would do things like run into the transition from day to night and night to day. The game would hitch severely to the point that it looked like it was going to crash. So I thought, no, I've completed the game. I am not going to hang around this game any longer than I have to, because it's going to fall apart, and it feels like it's spinning up, and it is getting very close to just coming apart at this point. So I give up and I move on. So yeah, overall, a good game. For me, the experience was significantly marred by bugs, but I don't seem to be that doesn't seem to have been the common experience for most players for this. So I don't know, it's something that I think is definitely worth mentioning, because it was a severe hindrance to me, but it doesn't look like it's something that is very common. So I don't know if there was something wrong. I had a save moving towards corruption or something like that. I don't know. But it was a good game marred by bugs, which is a shame, and just all too common these days, isn't it? So I guess that's it for this one. This has ran on slightly longer, but yeah, this is a good game. Again, I'm hovering between a 6.5 and a 7. Without the bugs, it's a definite 7. With the bugs, 6.5, maybe even lower than that, because they were so prevalent. But yeah, if you want to check out other stuff I'm doing, podcast platform of choice as usual. Check out A Winner Is You, and also have a look in the bottom in the feed for my socials to follow me there and find out what I'm up to and engage with me in probably inane, uninteresting chat. And yeah, that's me. So thanks for watching. Catch you later.